My name is Shirin. For a long time, I felt as if even my own name had been ripped from me. Today I'm 27, but it's as if a part of me has stopped in time, frozen at 17, in that August that split my life in half, between a before that seemed eternal and an after I could never have imagined. I want to share this journey with you, not because it's easy, but because I've discovered that sometimes the brightest light emerges from the darkest places. I grew up in Sinjar, a town surrounded by mountains that, to us, were like sacred guardians. There, among golden wheat fields and ancient stories passed down from generation to generation, was my home. It was 2014. I was 17 years old and wore my hair in braids that my mother had taught me to do since I was little, with all the patience and care in the world. Our house was simple, made of white adobe, but steeped in history and love. My father, Khalil, was a man of the land. His hands were marked by hard work, and his eyes always held a calm that made me feel safe. Every morning he would go out into the fields, whistling haunting melodies that seemed to speak to the earth itself. My mother, Gulisar, had a gift for transforming thread into art. She wove rugs that enchanted anyone who saw them, all while chanting ancient prayers from a well-worn CD. I had 3 younger brothers, and together we grew up surrounded by the traditions of our people. The festivals were magical. Women dressed in white robes embroidered with gold, drums resonating like the heartbeat of the earth. Children painted eggs with ancient symbols, red to celebrate life, blue representing the endless sky, green as a reminder that hope never dies. It was all part of who we were. But that summer, whispers began to swirl around our village. Strange words like caliphate and infidels began to circulate in the men's conversations after prayers. I didn't quite understand, but I saw my father's expression change. He became more serious, more distant. I asked my sister Abibi why he was so worried, and she simply replied, "They're just rumors. Nothing has ever happened here. We live in peace." Then came the night I'll never forget. I woke to voices in the backyard. My father was talking to our neighbor Jamil. I heard stray words. "They're coming. Mosul has fallen. They say they don't forgive the Yazidis." My father shook his head, as if it couldn't all be real, as if saying no was enough to stop what was coming. The elders began to reminisce about the old days. My grandfather would tell of the 74 massacres our people had faced throughout history. He always said, "We are like wheat. Storms knock us down, but we always grow back." I thought these were stories of the past, that those things could never happen again. She dreamed of studying in Duhok, wanted to be a nurse. It was all I ever wanted. And on that last night before everything changed, we had dinner together. My mother had prepared dolma, stuffing grape leaves with the same care as always. My father said a prayer before the meal, thanking God, whom we called Tagu and Malik, for another day of peace. Outside, the Zinyar Mountains loomed large, as if trying to protect us from what was to come. The sky was beginning to turn violet, and I never would have imagined that this would be the last sunset of my old life. That night, I fell asleep listening to the wind playing among the olive trees in the backyard. The sound was soft, almost like a lullaby blown across the sky. I didn't know, and perhaps it was for the best, that would be the last moment of true peace my heart would ever know. In my dreams, I ran barefoot through the fields with my brothers, laughing loudly, while the songs of larks mingled with our voices. It was pure, unclouded joy. And while I dreamed, the real world was already preparing to turn to ash. On the morning of August 3rd, 2014, everything seemed normal. The sun was timidly rising behind the sacred mountains, tinting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold. The white walls of our house reflected that light, as if they were smiling. I still believed that it would be just another ordinary day. My mother was already awake, as always, humming an old song as she made coffee. The smell of baking bread filled the kitchen, mingled with the aroma of mint tea boiling in the copper kettle. But something was different this morning. My father hadn't left for the field yet, and that in itself was strange. I found him in the courtyard, standing there, staring intently at the horizon, as if waiting for something he dreaded to see. His hands, always busy with some task, now hung heavy at his sides, as if carrying something invisible. I approached slowly. "Baba, what's wrong?" I asked, calling him by his usual affectionate nickname. He turned and looked at me with eyes that were no longer the same. There was a deep sadness there, and a fear he tried to hide, but couldn't. "Shirin, grab a small bag, just the essentials." His voice was low but firm. Before I could ask anything, the sound came, like distant thunder growing too fast. Engines. Several. A heavy vibration filled the air. I could feel it in my chest, in my bones, in my soul. The noise grew louder, as if the earth itself were trembling with fear. Suddenly, our neighbor Gamil came running, his face pale and covered in sweat. "Khalil, they're coming down the road. Black trucks, armed." It was as if time stood still. Panic descended upon us like a storm without warning. My mother dropped the tray with the teacups. The glass shattered on the stone floor, and the hot liquid spilled like blood-stained gold. "The children!" my father shouted urgently. "Now! We have to leave now!" What followed was a whirlwind of fear and haste. My mother ran inside, grabbing everything she could. Documents, some hidden cash, Grandma's medicines. I could only think of 3 things. A family photo, my great-grandfather's small Quran of Jasidi, and the embroidered shawl my mother had given me for my last birthday. My brother Baran cried uncontrollably, hugging the wooden horse our father had made for him. Rojan tried to get our cat, who was hiding under the table, his eyes wide, mirroring the terror we were trying to hide. Said helped my father load our grandmother onto the donkey we used to go to the market, and then they arrived. The noise became deafening. Along the dusty road, the first trucks appeared. They were black as a moonless night. They came at high speed, flags fluttering in the wind, and men dressed in black shouting words that burned just to hear. Words of hate, words that had no place in our land, our faith, our peace. From that moment on, everything changed. But I'll tell you about that later. "To the mountains," someone shouted amid the tumult. "Run, everyone to the mountains!" And so we did. We ran like never before, as if the ground itself were crumbling behind us. We left everything behind. Home, memories, childhood. Our bare feet pounded against the dry earth, kicking up dust that mingled with the tears on our faces. Soon, the sound of gunshots began to cut through the air like blades. Dry, rapid, cruel cracks. The Shingal Mountains, which had always been a place of faith and silence for us, became our only hope of salvation. Ahead of us, thousands of people ran. A crowd, a single body driven by the same primal impulse, survival. For the first few kilometers, we were still together. My family's hands formed a chain of love that refused to let go. My father carried Baran on his shoulders, and my mother walked beside me, squeezing my hand tightly while dragging Rogan with the other. Sed ran a little ahead, turning every few seconds to make sure we were there. But the climb was cruel. The terrain was becoming treacherous, and the sun was already burning mercilessly, as if it were against us too. It was then that we realized my grandmother could no longer keep up. Her body, already frail, gave way with each step. "I can't go on," she whispered, her voice almost broken. My father stopped, and in that instant, time seemed to freeze. His face was filled with a pain beyond words. "Khalil, you have to decide," said Jamil, our neighbor, walking past us with his young children. "Anyone who can't follow needs to hide and wait." It was cruel, but it was real. Life had become a field of impossible decisions. Before my father could choose, the roar of engines echoed again, only this time, closer. It wasn't people running away. It was them. They had caught up with us. "Run!" my father shouted. "Each of you go your own way. We'll meet later." There was panic, noise, screams. My mother squeezed my hand desperately. "Shirin, if anything happens, find your guardian aunt in Duhok. Promise?" I barely managed to nod. There was no time for anything else. From between the rocks, vehicles emerged. Black trucks, covered in dust and hatred. Armed men jumped out of the back, faces covered, eyes hard as iron. It was as if they were no longer human. "Nobody move!" one of them shouted in Arabic. His voice was like a punch to the gut. Everything stopped. I saw my mother push Rogan behind a rock, trying to shield her with her own body. I saw my father embrace Baran, trying to hide him with his arms. Sed tried to run. He tried, but one of the men grabbed him by the arm and threw him to the ground with the butt of a rifle. "Men on one side, women on the other," yelled the man who appeared to be the leader. Tall, with a thick beard, a deep scar running down the side of his face. No one dared question him. The separation was brutal, not just physically, but also emotionally. I saw my father and Saeed being pushed toward other Yazidi men and boys, their eyes filled with fear, but trying to stand firm. I saw my mother, Rogan, and I being dragged away with other women and girls. It was as if a part of me was being ripped away with every step we took away from them. "Father," I cried, reaching out with all I had left. "Father!" He turned, and even surrounded by weapons, even with his face dirty and his eyes wet, he shouted back in a firm voice, "Shirin, remember who you are. Never forget who you are." Those were the last words I heard from him. Soon after, they shoved us into tarpaulin-covered trucks. The smell inside was suffocating. Sweat, diesel, fear. A whole world was shattering, and all we could do was remain silent, trying to remember the name we carried and the faith that still held. The metal on the truck's walls burned under the blazing sun. We could barely touch it without getting hurt. They threw us in as if we were no longer people, just cargo. Women of all ages were huddled together, some weeping softly, others praying in whispers, while a few screamed the names of sons, husbands, fathers, whom they might never see again. My mother managed to stay by my side, her arm around my shoulders as if she could shield me from the entire world. Rogan, too small to understand, trembled, clinging to the hem of my dress. His teary eyes stared at me with fear and a single question. "Where are they taking us, Shirin?" But I had no answer. No one did. Not even the elders, the ones who always knew everything. The truck began to move with a jolt, tearing us from the mountains that had sheltered our stories, our prayers, our ancestors. Through the cracks in the torn canvas, I could still see, as if they were the last pages of a book that would be closed forever, the smoke rising from our village, the trampled fields, a few bodies on the ground, and in the distance, the Shingal Mountains, growing smaller and smaller until they disappeared completely. At that moment, something inside me broke. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt as if a part of me had been ripped away, and unbeknownst to me, that would be just the first of many deaths I would experience inside, the beginning of a slow process of destruction. But also one day, it would be the ground on which God would rebuild something new. I didn't know it yet, but he did. The journey seemed endless. Dusty roads, stifling heat, muffled sobs. After hours, the truck stopped. Before us, Telefar looked like a soulless, nearly dead city. The sunset bathed the buildings in a deep red, as if the sky itself were in mourning. When they told us to get off, my legs were shaking so badly I could barely obey. We were led through empty streets to what had once been a school, but there were no more children with books there. Now, the classrooms were cells. Each dust-covered blackboard seemed to carry the lament of a childhood ripped away. They separated us as soon as we entered. Older women on one side, younger women on the other. My mother clung to me. She struggled. She screamed, "She's my daughter. Please, leave us together." 2 men dragged her away by force, and I could only watch, paralyzed, suppressing my scream. The last thing I heard was her voice screaming my name, shattering my heart into 1,000 pieces. That scene burned into me like fire on my skin. I never saw her again. Rogan was led away with the younger girls. For a second our eyes met, eyes that said, "Stay with me." But she, too, disappeared into the crowd. We stayed there for 3 days. 3 days of silence broken only by screams coming from other rooms, occasional gunshots in the distance. At night, a girl named Nadia, who had studied with me at Sinar, would curl up beside me. We slept in each other's arms, trying to remember what it was like to live without fear. "Do you think our families are alive?" I whispered, as if saying it out loud was too dangerous. She didn't answer. She just held my hand tightly. On the 4th day, they came. Buyers. We were lined up in the schoolyard, as if we were being auctioned. Men walked among us, watching, choosing. Long beards, clean robes, cold eyes. They talked among themselves as if they were at a market. "The younger ones are worth more," I heard one of them say, as if he were talking about cattle. A man with a Syrian accent walked past, examining each one, lifting chins, touching hair, opening mouths. When he reached me, he cupped my face tightly. His hand was rough, unkind. "This one's good," he murmured. "Well cared for. It'll do." They sold it to me for $800. My buyer's name was Abu Yusuf, a commander, they said, mid-level. That day, my name became a number. My body became a commodity. But, even without knowing how, my soul still resisted. Because deep down, something stronger than fear whispered, "You are still a daughter. You are still God's." The house I was taken to in Mosul was surrounded by high walls, barbed wire, and an oppressive silence. From the outside, it looked like a fortress. From the inside, a prison with no windows of hope. There were other girls there, all with the same dull look. Some, like me, were Yazidi, others, Christian. None of them spoke much. It was as if their voices had been taken away along with their freedom. "You were lucky," one of them whispered on the first night, her eyes sunken, as if speaking from afar. "The lady of the house, Mariam Abuf, is Christian. She's not as cruel as the others. Just don't cross her." I learned what this meant, all too quickly. Abu Yusuf, the commander who had bought me, had strict rules. Rise before sunrise, clean every corner of the house, prepare meals with precision. A small mistake could lead to punishment, the kind I can't even put into words without feeling sick to my stomach. I tried to escape 2 weeks later. I waited until everyone was asleep, slid down a pipe into the garden, and ran through the streets of Mosul like someone running for their life. For the first time in a long time, I smelled the early morning air, and for a brief second, the sensation of freedom touched my fingertips. But it didn't last. They caught me before dawn. The punishment was brutal. They locked me for a whole week in a damp, dark basement where time didn't exist and silence screamed. When they finally took me out, Abu Yusuf simply said, "You're too much trouble. I'll sell you to someone who knows how to break you." That decision changed everything. I was handed over to a younger man named Abu Mansur. His appearance wasn't as frightening as Abu Yusuf's, but his cruelty was colder, quieter, more dangerous. His house was near the Tigris River. From my window, I watched those sacred waters flow by, oblivious to the horror growing on their banks. Abu Mansur was volatile. Some days he seemed like an ordinary man. On others, he exploded with blind fury. He screamed that I was a kafira, an infidel, a living insult to his faith. Every word was an attempt to diminish me, to erase who I was. And slowly, something inside me began to give way. I began to forget the sound of my mother's prayers. The words of Adabu and Malik sounded distant, like echoes of a fading faith. Where was our God? Where was our protector? Why did he allow this to happen to such a faithful people? One night, I found a piece of broken glass hidden under my bed. I sat on the floor, clutching it as if it had the power to end my pain once and for all. For a few seconds, all I wanted was to end it, to end myself. But then I saw my mother's face in my mind. I saw Rogan, small, frightened, calling me back, and something inside me, small but still alive, stopped me. I let go of the glass. I cried until my body was completely empty, and then I fell asleep, not from peace, but from exhaustion. After 3 months, Abu Mansur grew tired of me too. He took me to a market, yes, a real market, in central Mosul. There, dozens of Yazidi and Christian girls lined up, displayed like merchandise, priceless on chalkboards, as if we were fruits or spices. It was there that I met the worst of all, Abu Rahman. Even among the militants, he was feared. He had a reputation as a disciplinarian. His home wasn't just a place of captivity. It was a place where hope died quietly. "You will learn what it means to be property," he said on the very first day, his eyes burning with a hatred that did not come from the earth. That was when I thought it would be the end. But in fact, it was the beginning of a turning point, even if I didn't know it yet. "When I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd never been born." It was there, in that dark house, that my spirit broke for the last time. After months of trying to resist, clinging to the last shreds of my identity, I gave in. Becoming an empty shell seemed less painful than continuing to endure that unbearable pain. One particularly cruel night, after a brutal punishment, Abu Rahman dragged me to the basement. "Tomorrow will be worse," he said, with a smile that seemed made of pure evil. "I'm going to get rid of you. You're no longer useful." I understood, without needing him to say anything else. Lying on the cold floor, the chains tightening around my already bruised wrists, my body exhausted, I whispered a final prayer. "Agimelech, if you exist, if you ever loved us, please make this end soon." Little did I know that prayer would be answered, but not in the way I expected. The basement where Abu Rahman left me was a place where the light seemed to have disappeared forever. The concrete walls reeked of damp, despair, and a sadness that seemed almost palpable. I had been there for weeks, though I could no longer count the days. My world had shrunk to those 4 narrow walls, a cell of darkness measuring little more than 3 meters by 2. The chains had stopped hurting. My body had learned to tune out the physical pain, but my soul, it hurt too much. In the infinite solitude, my mind wandered through memories that seemed from another life. The smell of my mother's freshly baked bread, Rogan's infectious laugh, my father's voice blessing the table. Were they all just dreams? I had such a hard time believing that a simple, painless love could truly exist. Abu Rahman came twice a day, once to leave a piece of stale bread and water that tasted of rust, the other to remind me of what I was now. "You are nothing," he said, his voice dry and cold. "Your God abandoned you because he never loved you. Your parents are dead. Your sister is dead. You should be dead too." I didn't answer anymore. I didn't even cry. Tears need hope, and mine had long since dried up. Then, one afternoon, I heard voices upstairs, more voices than usual. Abu Rahman was speaking hurriedly to someone. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was different, urgent, hurried footsteps, doors slamming, silence. Hours later, he came down to the basement, and I saw an expression on his face I had never seen before, fear mixed with worry. He stood there, looking at me, as if deciding something crucial. "The CDOs are advancing," he murmured. "The Americans are bombing. Everything is falling apart." He crouched close to my face, his strong tobacco breath almost choking me. "You know what this means, don't you, Kafira? I can't take you with me." "I can't leave you here for the CDOs to find," he said, his eyes shining with firm resolve. "Tomorrow, it all ends. Your suffering, my problems with you, it'll all be over." He left without another word, but the message was clear. The end was near. That night, something unexpected happened inside my shattered heart. Instead of the suffocating fear I expected, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in months, there was no struggle, no resistance, no pain to fear. It was as if I were floating in warm water after so long battling storms. I closed my eyes and let my mind wander. One last journey to the golden wheat fields of Shinar. I saw my young mother, laughing as she chased Baran through the garden. I saw my father teaching me about the different varieties of wheat. "The earth always gives back what we sow with love, Habibi," he used to say. I thought of Rogan, my little sister, with her dreams of being a teacher, and wondered if she had the chance to teach, even at such a young age, before everything that happened to her. As these memories danced through my mind, something surprising happened. A warm presence began to fill that cold basement, as if an invisible fire had been lit within. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but the sensation only grew stronger, until I could no longer ignore it. I sat up, the chains clinking softly. For the first time in weeks, my heart beat with something other than fear, a quiet hope, as if something truly momentous was about to happen. Then I saw it. First, a faint light in the darkest corner of the basement. Gradually, it grew brighter and began to take shape. It was the silhouette of a man, but unlike any I'd ever seen. He wore a white robe that seemed made of light. When he looked up at me, his eyes held all the compassion I thought I'd lost in the world. He approached slowly, his footsteps silent on the damp ground. As he stood close, I could see his face clearly. Young, timeless, beautiful, but marked by a deep pain that I somehow understood perfectly. "Shirin," her voice was like fresh water in the desert. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the silence. He smiled, and in that smile there was more light than all the stars I had ever seen in the Shinar Mountains. "I've been with you through every moment of pain," he said. "I was there when you were ripped from your family. I've been in every house you were sold to. I've been here in this basement, crying with you every night." He knelt before me, ignoring the chains and the dirt. His hands, marked by strange scars on the palms, reached out to me, not touching me, but I felt their warmth. "This is not the end for you yet," he said in a voice so powerful that even the walls seemed to hear him. "Your story does not end here, my daughter. You have a purpose greater than all this pain." "I don't understand," I stammered, tears streaming down my face for the first time in weeks. Why did all this happen to me?" I asked, my voice trembling, a knot in my chest. His eyes filled with profound sadness, but they also held a light of hope that seemed almost impossible in that place. "I am the one true God, Shirin," he replied calmly. "Even if you can't understand it now, I was present in the midst of all this darkness. The suffering you experienced didn't come from me, but from the wrong choices made by human hearts that gave in to evil." He continued, with a firmness that seemed to penetrate the cold basement walls. I can use even the greatest pain and transform it into instruments of my glory." He extended his hand toward me, and though he didn't touch me, I felt it like a gentle breeze caressing my skin, an inexplicable warmth in the midst of that cold. "When you think it's all over, remember my words. It's not the end for you yet. Keep your eyes open, keep your heart ready, because I'm about to do something new." The light around him began to grow blinding, and I had to close my eyes to avoid getting lost in its glow. When I opened them, he had disappeared, but the sensation of his presence remained, steady and comforting. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. That night, I managed to sleep. There were no nightmares or fear. I dreamed of vast fields of wheat under a golden sky, and a soft voice whispered repeatedly, "It's not the end of you yet." I woke before dawn with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. The basement remained the same, cold, damp, with the chains tightening around my wrists. But something inside me had changed. It was as if I had awakened from a long nightmare into a different dream, full of hope, of a kind I can't explain. The words of that man in the white robe echoed in my mind, reverberating like a sacred mantra. "It's not your end yet." I repeated those words, savoring each syllable as if it were honey. I didn't know who he really was, but his presence had lit a small flame in my heart, where before there had been only cold ashes. I heard Abu Rahman's heavy footsteps descending the stairs, and for the first time, I didn't feel the usual panic. My body still trembled, but my soul was in a place where he couldn't reach me. "Today's the day," he announced, entering with a cruel smile plastered across his face. He held something in his hand, something I chose not to look at directly. "I've decided it's time to rid myself of the problem you've become." He stopped in front of me, expecting to see the fear he always liked to provoke. But when he met my gaze, he frowned, disconcerted. "What's your problem, Kafira?" he growled. "Have you finally lost your mind?" I didn't answer. Instead, I fixed my gaze on the small basement window. A ray of morning light filtered through the bars, casting a golden glow that reminded me of the light on that man's face. It was a sign I knew. A sign that despite everything, my story wasn't over yet. Abu Rahman followed my gaze, then gave me a quick slap to get my attention. "I'm talking to you, you Yazidi bitch." The blow stung, but the pain felt distant, as if it were coming from someone else. I spoke calmly, to my own surprise. "All these months, I've been afraid of you. Afraid of what you might do to me. Afraid of what all this could mean." He leaned in close, intrigued, perhaps even suspicious. "It was the first time in weeks I dared speak like this," I continued. "Last night, someone visited me. Someone told me it's not the end for me yet." Abu Rahman let out a harsh laugh, echoing off the cold basement walls. "Now you're seeing visions? Is your God going to save you?" "No," I replied firmly. "It's not just any God. It's someone who knows your name, Abu Rahman. Someone who knows every cruel act you've committed, every life you've taken." His laughter stopped suddenly. There was something in my voice that bothered him, a new authority he didn't recognize, and I said, feeling the words rise from the depths of my soul, "No matter how much you hurt my body, no matter how much you want to take my life, you will never touch my soul. That part is his." Abu Rahman struck me again, harder this time. "Shut up. I don't want to hear your nonsense." But I didn't stop. The words poured out like an unstoppable river. He told me that when this was all over, when the darkness was finally lifted, my story would be told, and through it, many would find hope. "Enough!" he shouted, but there was something in his gaze I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger, nor cruelty. It was fear, a deep fear that went beyond the physical. He turned and started up the stairs, but stopped at the bottom step. "This afternoon," he said without looking back, "when the sun is high and the heat is unbearable, it will all end." When he was gone, I sat there, feeling a strange peace fill the void he left behind. I thought of my family, my village, all the Yazidi girls who had endured the same horror as me. I thought of those who didn't survive, who would never see a new dawn, and I remembered the words of that man in white. I am about to do something new. The hours passed slowly. I heard hurried voices above, the sound of objects being dragged. Something was happening, something that made Abu Rahman and his men nervous. Through the small window I saw the sky change, a strange color, as if a storm were approaching. In the middle of the afternoon the sounds began, at first faint, like distant thunder, then closer, louder, explosions, bombs falling not far away. The building shook with each impact. Abdurrahman ran down the stairs, his face pale and sweaty. "Damn CDOs," he muttered. "The Americans are bombing the entire city." He looked at me, and now there was clear fear in his eyes. "Maybe I should wait, more for myself than for you. Maybe I should take you with me, use you as a shield." The explosions were getting closer. One was so powerful that the basement lights flickered, and dust fell from the ceiling. Abdurrahman swore angrily and bolted back upstairs, shouting hurried orders to his men. I was alone again, but this time the solitude had a different flavor. It was as if God had cleansed that space of all evil, leaving only what remained inside me, the pain and my shattered body. I closed my eyes and began to pray. I didn't call out to Tagus or Melik now, but to the man in white who, with his presence, had filled my cell. "I don't know who you are," I whispered softly, "but if you can truly do something new, if you can transform even this darkness into light for your glory, I am ready. Do whatever you must." The answer came not in words, but in a deep feeling that filled my entire being. It was love, pure, immense, and powerful, that melted away years of suffering in an instant. A forgiveness that was not just for me, but also for those who had hurt me. It was a hope so bright it erased every shadow I had ever known. And there, in that presence, I awaited the dawn of the most important day of my life. When morning came, it brought with it a sound I'll never forget. The piercing whine of shells in the air, followed by explosions that shook the ground beneath the foundations of that house. The coalition bombs fell relentlessly, advancing relentlessly like a storm. Abdurrahman came down to the basement 3 times in the first few hours, each time growing increasingly nervous and sweating. His hands trembled as he checked the chains that bound me, as if he expected to find me free. "It's your fault," he yelled the last time he appeared. We knew it was a senseless accusation, but he needed to vent his anger. His words bounced off the damp walls without reaching me. Since meeting the man in white, something inside me had changed. It was as if I'd created an invisible armor that warded off the venom in his words. Around noon, I heard hurried voices upstairs. Abdurrahman shouted orders, his footsteps echoing down the hallway as he prepared his escape, taking his belongings and destroying anything that might incriminate him. The roar of engines starting in the courtyard mingled with the silence that suddenly filled the house. It was absolute silence, something I hadn't heard in months, not even the steady drip of the broken pipe. It felt like the world had held its breath. And it was at that moment, in this tense stillness, that I heard a sharp whistle piercing the air, coming straight toward us. My heart raced, not from fear, but from a strange, intense anticipation. The man in white's words echoed within me. "Keep your eyes open. Keep your heart ready." And then came the explosion, a deafening roar that shattered everything around me in a symphony of shattered glass, cracked wood, and splintering concrete. The force of the impact threw me against the back wall of the basement, the chains cutting into my skin as my wrists ached from the tightness. But something inside me, in that moment, knew it was the beginning of something new. For a moment, everything around me was lost in darkness and rumbling. It felt like I was in the middle of an earthquake. When the noise finally subsided, I realized I was covered in dust and debris, coughing as my lungs struggled to filter the heavy, suffocating air. But something incredible had happened. The wall where my chains were fixed had partially collapsed, and the metal hooks that imprisoned me were ripped from the concrete. I was free. I stood there, motionless for several seconds, unable to comprehend what had happened. My hands, still scarred by the chains on my wrists, moved freely for the first time in months, a miracle so absurd that my brain refused to believe it. A beam had fallen diagonally across the basement, forming a sort of makeshift ramp leading to the hole in the ceiling created by the bomb. Through the opening, I could see patches of blue sky between the dark clouds of smoke. "It's not your end yet." The man in white's words echoed within me, giving me the courage to act. My movements were clumsy, a consequence of months of imprisonment, but I began to climb the rubble toward the light. Each step hurt, my weakened legs trembling under the weight of my body. The chains still hung from my wrists and caught on chunks of concrete, but I didn't give up. When I finally climbed out of the hole, the scene before me felt like the end of the world. Abdurrahman's house was a charred skeleton, twisted beams pointing skyward like accusing fingers, and the air was so thick with smoke and dust that breathing was a challenge. But I was out. I was free. Staggering, I stood there, trying to absorb the reality. The afternoon sun shone through the smoke, and though it smelled of destruction, to me it smelled of hope. That's when I heard voices approaching. Panic. Screams that reminded me I was still in hostile territory, where anyone could be as cruel as Abu Rahman. With what little strength I had left, I began to run, or something like it. It was a clumsy trot, like someone who had long ago forgotten how to use their own legs. The chains rattled and clanked with each step, and I had to stop periodically to catch my breath. But even so, I kept going, driven by a determination that came from a place deeper than my wounded flesh. The streets of Mosul were a maze of ruins. Entire buildings had fallen, forming mountains of rubble that blocked the way. Electrical wires hung like dead snakes, and the air was filled with the sharp smell of gas and burning smoke. I found precarious refuge in the wreckage of an old textile shop. The colorful silks, now gray with dust, were the only trace of the life that had once existed there. From inside that hiding place, I could hear the sound of military vehicles approaching. I had no idea if they were CDO soldiers, Iraqi troops, or other militants, but I couldn't risk a peek. For 3 days, I hid among the ruins of Mosul, moving only at night, drinking from puddles made by broken pipes, and eating whatever I could find in abandoned houses. The chains were a constant torment. The metallic clang could give away my position at any moment. After much struggle, I managed to break one of them with a sharp rock, but the other was still firmly attached to my left wrist. On the 3rd night, while taking refuge in the basement of a bombed-out house, I heard voices speaking Kurdish. CDO. My heart raced. Kurdish was the word of freedom, of relief, but it also carried the danger of being mistaken for a fighter. I made the riskiest decision of my life. I emerged from my hiding place with my hands raised. Yazidi, I shouted in Kurdish, my voice hoarse and almost unrecognizable to myself. I am Yazidi of Shinar. The flashlights turned on me, blinding me for a moment. I heard surprised gasps and quick footsteps approaching. As my eyes adjusted, I saw faces that bore no hostility, only astonishment and compassion. How is this possible? Murmured a major of the CDOs, a man with a gray beard. You've been hiding here the whole time? I couldn't answer. The words choked in my throat, and all I could do was cry for my lost family, for the months of imprisonment, for all the girls who didn't have the chance to escape. But I also cried with relief, with gratitude, with a joy so strong it almost hurt. It's okay, the soldier said tenderly, taking off his coat to cover me. You're safe now. Let's take you home. As the military vehicle left the ruins of Mosul behind, I took one last look back. Somewhere among the wreckage was the basement where I had hit rock bottom, where I had lost all hope, where a man dressed in white had visited me with an impossible promise. It's not the end for you yet, I whispered to the ruins receding into the distance. At that moment, I didn't know how true those words were, nor how that promise would be the foundation for a whole new life. The Key refugee camp stretched out like a small city of white tents under the scorching Kurdistan sun. It was August 2015, exactly 1 year since my world had fallen apart. Even though I was free, a part of me was still trapped in that basement in Mosul. The soldiers handed me over to aid workers at the camp entrance. They were kind people, wearing blue UN vests, speaking softly. But when they looked at me, I saw in their eyes that same expression I already knew well, sadness mixed with a painful curiosity about what I had been through. They gave me a small tent, which I shared with 3 other Yiddish women, all survivors like me. Hanan, for example, had lost her 5 children when her village was attacked. Vian managed to escape during the forced march to the mountains, but her husband and parents disappeared along the way. Shilan, who was only 2 years older than me, carried in her eyes the same emptiness I saw in my own reflection. In the early days, she barely remained present. She simply existed. I ate the food they gave me, but I couldn't taste it. I slept when exhaustion overcame me, spending long hours gazing at the Shinar mountains in the distance. Every night, nightmares visited me. She woke screaming, the sheets soaked with sweat, with that metallic taste of fear stuck in her mouth. The trauma had imprisoned me again, only this time it was an invisible prison, made of memories and dread. During the day, I could roam freely through the camp, but inside, I was still chained in that cellar, in Abu Rahman's hands, trapped in the despair that never left me. 3 weeks after my arrival, the rejection began to show. An elderly woman approached me as I waited in line for food. "Little girl," she said, her voice trying to sound maternal but cutting. "We know what happened to you. We know you were touched. In our tradition, a woman who has been touched by infidels can no longer be considered pure." I froze. The plate in my hands trembled, but I hadn't chosen any of this. Before I could respond, another woman spoke firmly. It's not about choice. It's about purity, about maintaining the dignity of our people. She spoke bitterly, carrying all the shame I felt. My own people reject me because I was used. David then turned to me and spoke directly to my heart. Listen, Shirin, what was done to you doesn't define who you are. The harm others do doesn't diminish your worth as a person created by God. It was the first time in months I'd heard my name spoken with respect and tenderness. I was surprised and asked, "Does your God really care about people like me?" He replied with unmistakable conviction, "Especially people like you." David told me a story Jesus told, about a shepherd who leaves 99 sheep safe to search for the one that is lost. You are that lost sheep, Shirin. He's been looking for you all along. Something stirred in my chest, a distant echo of that presence I'd felt in the basement. Could the man in white and this Jesus David spoke of be the same person? "Can I visit you tomorrow?" David asked as he got up to leave. I nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I eagerly awaited the dawn of a new day. Little did I know that that simple yes would be the first step toward a transformation that would change not only my life, but my entire understanding of God and my purpose in this broken world. The next day, David returned, as promised, accompanied by a Kurdish woman named Rogan. Hearing that name, my heart leaped. It was the same as my younger sister's. For a moment, I was transported back to those innocent days in Sinjar, when life was simple and love seemed infinite. Rogan is a sister in faith, David explained, as we sat in the fragile shade of an abandoned medical tent. She carried within her a painful past, but in a way that could understand my pain in a way I still couldn't. Rogan was around 40, her hair already showing gray, and her eyes weary from so much struggle. But when she smiled, a soft light illuminated her face, a light that seemed to come from within her. Around her neck was a small wooden cross, discreet, almost imperceptible. Despite this, she was Muslim. Before I could ask, David began to tell her story, as if she felt I needed to hear it right then. "I lost my husband and 3 children in the Al-Qaeda attack on our village in 2007, she said. "For years, I blamed God for it all. I stopped praying. I stopped believing in anything good." Those words touched my heart. That was exactly how I felt, as if God had abandoned not only me, but our entire people. "And what changed?" I asked, curious, trying to understand. She responded calmly, as if speaking of something inevitable. "Jesus appeared to me in a dream. He showed me that he was beside me through every tear, that he cried with me, that he carried my pain. He told me that my family was at peace with him, and that I had a purpose to fulfill here, in this world. It was like a wave that hit me, so similar to what I'd felt that dark night in the basement, that I couldn't help but be startled. The words caught in my throat. David leaned in with a soft, hopeful look. "You too?" he asked. "What, Shirin?" I whispered, afraid that if I spoke out loud, everything would disappear. I had a vision too. The night before I was released, a man dressed in white came to me and told me my story wasn't over yet. Rogan held my hand tenderly, conveying warmth and comfort. "It was Jesus, sister. He found you in your darkest hour because he loves you." But I defended myself. "I'm not Christian. I'm a Yazidi. We followed Tagasimelech for thousands of years." David replied firmly, "Jesus loves you exactly as you are. He doesn't demand that you change to love you. He loved you in that basement, when it seemed like everything was over. He loves you now, even as you face doubt and pain." In the weeks that followed, David and Rogan came to visit me every day. They didn't try to force me to believe anything, just offered friendship and understanding. They brought a Bible in Kurdish, and when curiosity got the better of me, they began reading stories about Jesus. They told me about the woman accused of adultery, condemned by the religious leaders. Jesus stood between her and the crowd and said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." And one by one, everyone walked away. The accusers walked away, leaving only Jesus and the woman standing there. She looked at him hesitantly and asked, "Does no one condemn you?" Jesus calmly replied, "No one, not even I, condemn you. Go and sin no more." As I listened to that story being read, tears welled up uncontrollably. It was as if those words came straight to me, like a whisper from Jesus himself, speaking to my heart through that ancient book. They also told me about Mary Magdalene, a woman who carried 7 demons, and yet became one of Jesus's most faithful followers. "No matter how broken your past is," Rogan explained, Jesus can pick up the pieces and transform everything into something beautiful. But the real change within me only began one dark night, when the nightmares returned with a vengeance. I woke up screaming, sweating and shaking, as if I were still trapped in that basement. The women in the tent didn't even wake up. They were used to my night terrors. I sat there in the dark, my body tense, unable to fall back asleep. That's when I remembered what Rogan had taught me about prayer, talking to him, as to a friend. How would I talk to a friend? Jesus? I whispered into the darkness, feeling a little ashamed. If you really are who David and Rogan said you were, if you are that man who appeared to me in the basement, I need help. I can't live in this fear anymore. What happened next changed everything forever. His presence arrived slowly, like the sun rising over the horizon. First, a warm feeling came from my chest that spread down my arms and legs. Then a deep peace enveloped me, relaxing every tense muscle. When I finally opened my eyes, he was there. In my small tent, the same man dressed in white who had visited me that dark night. His eyes were filled with that infinite compassion, his smile filled with the tenderness that had broken my despair. I felt my voice come out light, like water refreshing a parched soul. Jesus, I said, without any doubt this time. He sat on the floor beside me, naturally and calmly. I said, "It's not the end yet. Do you understand why it's not completely over yet?" He smiled, held out his hands, and for the first time I could see the scars on his palms, glowing with a soft light. "These wounds," he said, "I bear them for you, for your pain, for the shame they made you feel, for every tear that fell." I trembled, but my own people reject me, I confessed. They say I have lost my purity. His eyes filled with sadness, but also with a firm strength. "I was with you every time you were hurt. I cried when you cried. I bled when you bled," he said, his voice full of tenderness. "Nothing they did to you diminished my love. You are precious to me, Shirin. You are pure because I purified you with my blood." Tears began to stream down my face, but they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief, of a freedom I hadn't known in a long time. "And now, what do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice trembling. He replied softly, "I want you to forgive me." My body stiffened. Forgive? Not because they deserve it, but because you need to be free. The hatred you harbor toward Aburaman, toward everyone who hurt you, is an invisible chain that still binds you. I protested. "Even though I'm free, I can't. It's impossible to forgive everything they did to me." "You can't," he agreed calmly, "but I can. If you allow me to work through your heart, my love will do the impossible." His hands enveloped mine, and I felt a warmth that seemed to fill me, a strength that strengthened me from the inside out. "I will give you a new heart, Shirin, a heart capable of loving even your enemies, of forgiving what seems unforgivable, and of helping others who, like you, have been hurt." My voice faltered as I asked what I feared most. He smiled even softer and said, "Your father and Saeed are with me. They died defending the faith, and I welcome them as heroes. Your mother and Rogan are alive, Shirin. They are in a refugee camp in Germany. One day, you will find them." Joy so strong flooded me that I felt my chest nearly burst. "I promise," he added. "But first, you have a mission here. There are many others like you. Shirins scattered throughout this region, throughout the world. They need to hear that there is hope, that they can be free from the pain they carry." He stood, and I knew it was time to leave. "Will you come back?" I asked, my voice trembling, grasping every moment of his presence. "I'm never truly leaving," he replied. "I will always be by your side, every step of the way. When you speak of my love, I will speak through you. When you comfort the broken, I will comfort them through you." The light around him shone brightly, filling the entire tent. "Remember, Shirin, you were broken to be healed, lost to be found. You were taken captive so that you could set others free." When the light faded, I stood there, alone in the tent, but I no longer felt lonely. A warm, sweet presence filled my heart and the space around me. I knelt on the dusty ground and said the first Christian prayer of my life. "Jesus, I believe that you are the Son of God. I believe that you died for my sins and rose again to give me eternal life. I give you my heart, my life, my future. Use me for your glory." In that instant, I was born again. The first rays of dawn were streaming through the tent opening when David arrived for his daily visit. He stood in the doorway, watching my face with a look of restrained hope. "Shirin, there's something different about you today," he said softly. I smiled for the first time in months. A real smile. Jesus came to me last night, I confessed. Not in a dream, but for real. He saved me. David's eyes filled with tears, and without a word, he knelt beside me on the tent floor. Would you like to pray with me? He asked softly. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. Together, we raised our voices in gratitude to God, for His mercy, His renewing love, for the miracle that was happening in my life. When we finished, an immense joy washed over me, as if I were floating, too light to fit inside my body. There's something I need to do, I said, still trembling. Jesus told me I need to forgive even Abraham. David looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. Shirin, this is a giant step. Are you sure you're ready for this? No, I confessed, but he promised to do the impossible through me, and I trust him. That afternoon, I summoned all my courage for an act I knew would cause a stir in the camp. I asked permission to speak at the weekly community meeting, the time when refugees gathered to discuss their daily hardships and needs. When my name was called, I walked to the center of the tent. I looked out at more than 200 people, Yazidis, Christians, Muslims, all victims of the same cruelties. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like everyone could hear it. My name is Shirin, I began, my voice trembling slightly. I'm from Sinjar, and for 13 months I was a prisoner of ISIS. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some leaned in to hear better. Others looked away uncomfortably. I came here tonight to tell you about a miracle, I continued, gaining strength with each word. Not just the miracle of my escape, which was also God's work, but the miracle Jesus performed in my heart. The whispers grew louder, and a Yazidi woman stood up, her voice hard. What are you talking about, girl? You've lost your reason and your honor. His words cut like a knife, but I remembered what Jesus had told me about my true worth, the one no one can take away. I haven't lost my reason, I replied calmly. I've found the truth. Jesus found me in my darkest hour, and showed me that my worth doesn't depend on what they did to me, but on how much He loves me. You are a traitor, someone shouted behind me. You have abandoned the faith of our ancestors. I took a deep breath, asking Jesus to guide my words. I have not abandoned anything true, I said firmly. I have found the true God, the creator of the Sinjar Mountains, the one our people have always loved, the one who placed the most beautiful traditions in our hearts. I approached the center of the circle so everyone could see me clearly. But there's something else I need to say, something difficult to understand, I said, pausing. I forgave Abraham. I forgave all the men who bought and sold me. I forgave them for what they did to our people. The silence that filled the space was almost palpable, until it turned into a clamor of voices filled with pain and outrage. This is impossible, shouted a young man, his face contorted with rage. They must pay for what they did, a woman yelled. You betrayed us all! The dead demand justice! The words echoed with an almost suffocating force. I waited for the noise to subside before continuing, my voice firm but calm. I'm not saying there shouldn't be justice. What I'm saying is that the hatred we carry is destroying us from within, just as they tried to destroy us from without. My eyes met those of the woman who had screamed most vehemently. Sister, I carried that hatred too. It consumed me, robbed me of sleep, made me feel like a prisoner, even after my escape. But when Jesus taught me to forgive, it was like He broke these invisible chains that held me back, I explained. A middle-aged man, his face scarred from the loss of his wife and children, raised his voice in pain. How can you ask this? How can we forgive those who destroyed everything we love? I'm not asking you to forgive in your own strength, I replied. I'm talking about a God who gives us the impossible, the strength to forgive when it seems impossible. Jesus told me I was broken to be healed and taken captive to set others free. The question came from another voice. What about justice? Justice will come, I assured. But revenge only breeds more revenge. Hatred only fuels more hatred. If we want a different future for our children, we must break this cycle. Then a young woman who had remained silent stood up. I recognized her as Nadia, one of the girls I had studied with at Telefar prison, who had escaped during a bombing raid months later. Her voice trembling, she said, Shirin, I had dreams too. I dream of a man of light who tells me that all is not lost. Do you think it could be the same? He asked. I felt tears well up, this time of joy. Yes, sister, Jesus is calling you too. The meeting ended in a divided atmosphere. Some walked away bitterly, others approached curiously, but deep down, I knew I had planted a seed, and that Jesus would make it grow. In the weeks that followed, I began meeting with a small group of refugees who wanted to learn more about Jesus. We met in an abandoned tent on the edge of the camp, reading the Bible, praying, and sharing stories of pain and hope. David guided me, helping me understand God's grace, salvation, and unconditional love. Rogan became my mentor, showing me how to live my Christian faith in a camp where the majority were Yiddish Muslims. It wasn't easy. Many of my fellow Yiddish people saw me as a traitor, someone who had abandoned their ancestors. Some even threatened to report me to the authorities for causing religious division. But there were also precious victories. Nadia committed herself to Christ just 3 weeks after my first talk. Miriam, an Assyrian Christian who had lost her faith when her church was destroyed, renewed her commitment to Jesus after hearing my testimony. And most importantly, I began to heal in ways I never imagined possible. The nightmares never completely disappeared, but they lost their power to paralyze me. When they came, I simply prayed, and Jesus' presence soothed them, like a gentle balm to a wounded soul. Then one day, David arrived with news that turned my life upside down. "Shirin, I've been working with some international organizations to help you find your family," he told me, trying to contain his emotions. "I think we found your mother and Rogan." My heart nearly stopped. "Where?" I asked, my voice cracking. "In a refugee center in Berlin. A woman named Gulisar Talo and her daughter Rogan are registered there. Their descriptions match yours." I cried for hours. A crazy mix of euphoria and fear took hold of me. Were they really alive? Would they recognize me after everything I'd been through? How would they react to my new faith, so different from hours before? And the bureaucracy, the paperwork, the wait to finally join them. I knew my time in that refugee camp was coming to an end, but I felt, clearly, that my ministry was just beginning. At my last tent meeting, with a group that had now grown to over 30 people, I shared what Jesus had placed on my heart. Not all of us can change the whole world, but all of us can touch a life, heal a heart, plant a seed of hope. That's what he taught me. Jesus set me free so that I could be free, but not only that, so that I could help others find freedom too. I looked at each face in that circle and saw there a reflection of my own pain, but also of my hope. Darkness never has the last word. Evil doesn't win in the end. Jesus has already won, and we are part of that victory. As I packed my few things for the trip to Germany, I felt I was carrying something more valuable than any material object. A mission. The mission Jesus gave me, to bring his love and redemption to a broken world. My story of captivity had come to an end, but my journey towards true freedom was just beginning. Today, here in my small apartment in Berlin, looking out the window at the park where my mother and I used to walk every morning, I remember it all with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. It's been 8 years since my liberation, 5 since I was reunited with my family, and every day I marvel at how Jesus transforms the ashes of a shattered life into something full of beauty and hope. The reunion with my mother and Rogan was everything I'd dreamed of, and more than I'd feared. At the airport, when we finally saw each other, we stood frozen for a few seconds, as if unable to believe the moment was real. Then we threw ourselves into each other's arms, crying out the pain of years apart. It was difficult to tell them about my new faith. My mother cried, but not with joy, with confusion and pain. "How can you embrace the religion of our persecutors?" she asked, her heart aching. "It's not like that, Mom," I replied calmly and patiently. Jesus doesn't belong to just one people. They distort everything they touch. Jesus is pure love. He was the one who saved me when all seemed lost. It took time, many conversations, and tears. But in the end, my family saw the transformation in me, and this opened a door to love and reconciliation. Rogan was the first to accept Christ. My mother took a little longer, but 2 years ago, during a particularly difficult Christmas, she came to me with tears in her eyes. "Shir," she said, "I have been praying to Jesus. If he can heal your heart filled with so much hate, if he can bring you back to us, then he is real. I want to know him." Today, the 3 of us serve together in a church that ministers specifically to refugees from the Middle East. I've had the opportunity to speak in over 50 churches across Europe, sharing the story of how Jesus rescued me not only physically, but also spiritually. On one of my trips back to the Middle East, something happened that I will never forget. After a lecture, a woman approached me, her voice trembling. "Are you really Shirin of Sinjar?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "I knew Aburaman," she said. "My blood ran cold. It was the mother of the man who tortured me. He died in a bombing shortly after you escaped," he continued. And then, his voice breaking, he revealed something I never imagined. "A Yazidi girl told me about a God who forgives even the worst sinners. Do you believe that?" he asked. "A God capable of forgiving a mother who created a monster?" I held the hands of that woman, the mother of my tormentor, and together, we prayed that she would receive Christ. That day, I understood more deeply than ever what Jesus meant when he told me I was broken to heal, captive to set others free. To everyone listening to these words and experiencing their own dark night, I want you to know this: it's not over yet. No matter how deep the hole you're in, Jesus is seeking you. He sees you, loves you, and has a plan for your life that is more beautiful than you can imagine. Don't give up. Don't lose hope. Your rescue story has already begun. Jesus set me free so I could set others free, and that mission will continue until he returns.